Hello there, everyone. Welcome. And today I would like to talk a little bit about the Wheel of the Year. Specifically, we all know that the Wheel of the Year is a central part of practice for most witches. And what we don't really talk about a whole lot is the fact that some of us can have some real issues adjusting to the Wheel of the Year when we're starting out or even not starting out. I have run into some issues myself recently with the Wheel of the Year. So specifically for this video, what I'm going to talk about is problems that come up or can come up with trying to follow the Wheel of the Year, specific problems that I have had in my practice trying to follow the Wheel of the Year, potential solutions to that, and a little bit of my adjustment to the Wheel of the Year, things that I have started to do to better recognize and participate in my year, my religious year. So to start off with, as mentioned, Wheel of the Year is a central aspect of witchcraft for most of us. Not all of us, because I think I've mentioned in the past, I differentiate between witchcraft and whatever your tradition is. So Wicca, Asatru, Dionysic, Gardnerian, eclectic, all of that in my concept is religion, when you follow specific tenets and holy days, etc. Witchcraft for me is spirituality. It is, I could be a Christian, a Jew, a Catholic, whatever, and still be a witch. So that is the difference for me. And the important thing, no matter what religious calendar you follow, is to be comfortable with that calendar and to enjoy participating in your holy days. If it becomes tedious, which is going to be pretty much problem number one, then you're not going to enjoy it and you are less likely to participate in it. And then that's when we start feeling like lousy witches because we're not following the Wheel of the Year or the moons or what have you. Well, all of the things that we think we should follow. Or then you become a Sabbath witch like the Sunday Christians and only attend, if you're part of a coven, those events, but not doing much otherwise, which is kind of the opposite. All right, so problems with following the Wheel of the Year. As many of you have probably noticed, the Wheel of the Year is very busy. We have usually 8 Sabbaths, and then within that time frame, you also have at least 12 full moons, new moons. Generally, there's going to be 13 of each of those, plus any additional holidays, celebrations, birthdays, etc. that you may want to celebrate for your own personal path or just in your personal life. And that means that every single month, pretty much, you're going to be doing stuff. And this can become very hectic, very stressful if you're trying to do full rituals, full celebrations with all of the upkeep, all of the background, the research, the crafting, the preparation, all of that every month. You will get burnt out really quickly. And now for some of the more, I won't say more traditional, but the monotheistic religions, it doesn't feel as stressful for us. Many of us are coming from those religions, then that doesn't feel as stressful because it's been ingrained into us since we were children. When we know when the holidays are coming up, we probably don't celebrate all of them, with great gusto. So it's just kind of a part of everyday life. But when practicing witchcraft or Wicca or whatever your tradition is, it's not necessarily an everyday part of life, and until it becomes that way, it can seem difficult. So what I suggest, let me see if I left out any problems. Oh, another issue that I ran into with the Wheel of the Year is not all of the holidays can be easily swapped over if you are transitioning from one tradition to another. For example, I transitioned over from basically a Wiccan standpoint to Asatru. And while there were still 8 main celebrations, technically 9, because they had Walpurgisnacht and May Day, which are right next to each other, even though there was that similarity, I did not feel all of the holidays directly overlap. There were some, and I'll show you this in a moment, there were some that were just slightly off. So that could cause issues if you are used to one way of celebrating things at a certain time of year and then feel as though you have to swap to celebrating that holiday at a different time. That can cause issues. All right, so those are the main problems. Just feeling overwhelmed, having issues with overlap and changing things over when you're moving from one tradition to the next, and how to deal with that. Some possible solutions to this are, first and foremost, I would say, agree to disagree with your tradition. Unless you are in a coven and more or less mandated to do things at the same time as the other members of that coven, there is no steadfast reason why you have to do a certain thing on a certain day. With the possible exception maybe of the equinoxes and solstices. That's 4 out of 8. Those have definite dates attached to them. But the rest, in my opinion, are flexible. They are malleable to how you want to participate in them. And that means, in my case, you not only get to say, I think I want to celebrate that on this day instead of that day, but you also get to say, this holiday really does not, it doesn't energize me, it doesn't scream at me, I'm not feeling it, and therefore I'm not going to observe it this year, or any year, or whatever you decide. Some holidays just have less meaning to the individual than others. And I will show you what those holidays are for me also in a little bit, my next section, when I show you how of the year. And another thing that you can do, other than figuring out what observances are most important, is also to do the same, not just for the Sabbats, but for the Esbats. So decide how you want to celebrate the moons. Do you want to celebrate the new and full moon every month? Do you want to celebrate just one? Do you want to alternate between the two? Maybe celebrate quarterly, or just when you feel you have something to do for that moon, when it makes sense to do it. Basically, that is the idea for all of this. Figure out what makes sense to you to do and focus on that. The rest of it is just clutter, and it's going to bring down your entire practice if you try to focus on everything and just get burnt out. So only focus on those things that are the most important to you. Lastly, in this segment, names. Names are just names. So I'm going to show you what I mean in a second, but many of us have issues with how to pronounce the different Sabbat names. Many of these names come from older traditional languages that may or may not have anything to do with any language that we as individuals ever learned, or is maybe even a part of our genetic history. So I would say that's one of those little details to not stress over. If you are part of a coven, then coven members will all be using the same language. They'll all be using the same terminology, and that's fine. If you are not part of a coven, don't worry about it. call the day whatever the day is to you. And I'll get more into that in just a second. So those are my potential solutions. Just agree to disagree with your tradition, figure out what is the most important to you, and run with what makes sense for you. Okay? That said, how did I adjust my Wheel of the Year, or how am I adjusting it so far? I have had major issues trying to overlap my Wiccan calendar and my Asatru calendar. There are things from both traditions that I really enjoy that may or may not mesh so well. So the first thing I realized just recently, I have tried multiple times to draw out my own Wheel of the Year, and it just was not working. The Wheel of the Year was just totally off kilter and either top heavy, bottom heavy, however I drew it. I made an interesting discovery. So take a look at this. This is my updated Wheel of the Year. I have my dark half of the year and my light half of the year, and I will explain what these other things are. But you will notice that this is not segmented into 8. This goes into the 12 months of the year. This was a big aha moment for me, I'm telling you. I realized that there is something going on for me in every single month, a holiday, a solar holiday observance in every month except July. I don't know what happened there. Poor July got left out. Maybe July didn't show up that day when holidays were given out. I don't know. But because of this, because there was something going every month, it threw off my concept of the Wheel of the Year, which had 8 items in it. I have marked out the equinoxes and the solstices. These are the ones that have this kind of orange highlighting around the segment there. And what I noticed when I changed my concept from 8 to 12 is that basically in the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, the in-between, so here we have Yule over here, and then I have 2 items happening here, January and February, which in the Wiccan calendar would have only been 1. You have Imbolc, February 1st. But here we have the Feast of Lunar and Disting. So that created conflict for me. And these are actually, at least one of them, so Disting is kind of more like Imbolc. Feast of Lunar is celebrated more around one of the moons. Several of these in Asatru, at least in the materials that I am following, they choose the day based off of the moon. So I have a combination lunisolar calendar, which was also an issue because they are not distinct anymore. I'll get into that in a moment. So, okay, so I had 2 where formerly there was 1, and then we have the equinox, and then again I have 2 holidays where there's normally 1, May Day, but we have Walpurgisnacht also, and so on around the year. So this added a considerable amount for me, and yet somehow, somehow it wound up roughly the same number of major holidays. So I'm still kind of confounded by that, but you see the main dilemma here. The other thing was, I have certain holidays that it's mainly, well, actually one that was causing major issues. So in Asatru we have winter nights. That corresponds roughly to the autumn equinox. The autumn equinox is in September, but winter nights, the kind of background, the historical stuff, the cultural stuff related to it, screams Samhain. It is basically Samhain in my understanding of it. And even Samhain, you know, I love Halloween, and it is very difficult to separate even your pagan holidays from the popular secular holidays like Halloween. Secular holiday, or what's become that way, because it is also a Christian holiday with All Saints. But because of that, I have a very, very strong attachment to celebrating this particular holiday on October 31st. I want to do it October 31st, and therefore, this is where I was saying holidays are flexible. I moved winter nights to October. I said that's when it is for me, but that left a gap here in the equinox. So I would still like to celebrate the equinox just to have an even feel of the year. I want to celebrate at a minimum those four, the solstices and the equinoxes. So I will have to figure out something else, probably something small, a minor observation that I can do for the equinox. On that note, I have decided, because it is way too much trouble and stress and confusion for me to do full rituals and full workings, especially as a solitary. It seems like kind of a waste of energy. For every single holiday that happens almost every month, I took a look at what are the holidays that mean the most to me. And basically, I came up with Yule, Winter Nights, Ostara, although that one I don't really do a full ritual for Ostara. I just have some very strong family tradition stuff, ties that I do for that holiday. And again, I celebrate at Easter, not necessarily the equinox, because that's when I'm used to celebrating that. So even though they're supposed to coincide, they don't always. But that's another one that I have shifted to match what I'm already comfortable with. All right. And then I have I like Walpurgisnacht, but I don't do a whole lot for it, so that's another maybe. So basically I have those two big major holidays, both at the end of the year, and the rest for me are kind of, I might do it, I might not. I might just do a very simple observation, light a candle, say a prayer, something like that, and call it good. But I am not going to stress myself out over every single holiday. That said, I also have additional holidays that I personally like to celebrate, that I have added in or taken out. You will note I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. My family always did it, but I'm rarely with my family for Thanksgiving. And me by myself, I'm not roasting a turkey, sorry. I might buy some turkey breast or something, but I do not do Thanksgiving. What I do like to do are Veterans Day, Memorial Day. I thought there was another one, but apparently not. So those two, Veterans Day and Memorial Day, I like to add those in. So, and for those, I do like to, I may not do a full ritual for those, but I do like to set up an altar in the form of a missing man table, which I've mentioned, I believe, in the past. Okay, how do I always get so long-winded on these videos? All right, last tidbit. How am I incorporating the lunar year in this? I am the first to admit I do not consistently celebrate the moons. I like to, but it just, as said, every single month and one moon, right, basically every 2 weeks, there's a moon to celebrate, and that becomes way too overwhelming for me. So I will celebrate the moons if there is something specific that's kind of calling at me that I feel it would be good to do in a moon ritual. This, by the way, for me, was another change to my Wheel of the Year and to my practice in general, because even though the Old Norse calendar is lunisolar, they celebrate the solstices, the equinoxes, but the main yearly calendar went off of the moon. there is really no moon lore in Asatru. There's not that I have found, not that I've heard of. So Esbats are not a thing, but I enjoy Esbats. So I continue to celebrate the moon in the way that I used to in Wicca, which is totally different because the Norse tradition does not have a moon goddess. It's a moon god. But I use whatever energy feels necessary. So if it's a moon god, moon goddess, whatever, my moon celebrations are separate. So they are an addition to my chosen tradition. This inner circle that I've put in here represents the lunar months. Now this, just because I have issues drawing stuff, this is set up to be exact with the different months, but in actuality, this would be slightly askew. So January to February, February to March, etc. And what I have done with these names, this is why I'm saying names are just names. Don't take it to heart. I went through and I looked at, I had 3 options for these lunar months, how I want to kind of think of them and the names I want to give them. The old Frankish names, Anglo-Saxon, and Icelandic. The Icelandic is probably the most reliable because the Icelandic information lasted, pagan information lasted the longest. They were one of the last areas to convert to Christianity. So that's kind of the more authentic if you want to look at it that way. But in each of these 3, obviously I was not able to pronounce pretty much anything in Icelandic, and the others were difficult. Frankish was the closest to German, which I do know, so I had an easier time with that. But again, why stress over pronouncing something that is not something native to you, unless it really has some deep meaning to you, which for me it does not because I don't know the language. So I did it this way. I took a look at what I had, plus the explanation of what the names meant, and I compared them between the 3. And many of them had similar meanings, like Hay Month or Holy Month. Holy Month was around Yule, things like that. Some of them were different between the different languages, but I basically said, okay, so which of these names makes the most sense to me? Which do I think resonates with this month for me? And so I chose what each month meant to me and referenced those other things just to look at, and then I just translated into German because I mean I could do it in English, that's fine, that's my native tongue, but just to have a little variety, I am just about as comfortable in German. I'm not as fluent, but I'm comfortable with the language and I enjoy it. I think it's beautiful. So I just translated, and there you have it. That is how I got my month names, my lunar month names. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because it makes sense to me. So, all right, I'm going to cut off now because I am going on 25 minutes, but what I want you to get out of this is, do not feel bad if you are feeling overwhelmed and burnt out by the Wheel of the Year. There is a lot to adjust to. So do your best not to try and do all of it all at once. You may build up to that over time as your practice becomes more a part of your daily life and your daily practice. Then you may find yourself celebrating anything and everything for the entire year with ease. I think that's a goal we all want to achieve, right? But in the beginning, it's probably not going to be that way. So don't beat yourself up about it. Don't try not to stress too much about it. Just take the time, your learning time, to step back, look at it, and say, okay, what is important to me? Either in general, or you could say, okay, what is important to me this year? Or right now at this moment? What do I want to celebrate? Pick and choose what you want to do and devote all of your energy into those few but important things. That will make it much more meaningful. That will make it much better prepared. And then the following year, you've got this one already set to go, practically on autopilot. You have it on paper, you have it in your heart, you have it in your mind. It's good. So then later you can say, okay, for this year or this quarter, whatever you're going off of, what do I want to focus on now? Maybe I want to do more SBAT work this year. So let me choose 2 or 3 moons, maybe 1 a quarter, that I want to really delve into. I highly recommend doing it that way to save your sanity and to have a more meaningful and deep, thorough, enriching experience in living your Wheel of the Year. All right, thank you all for watching, sticking with me again, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.